So I'm going to talk about about dark mode. Have a quick show of hands for people that like dark mode. So cool. I do. So basically, I work for the BBC. There's in the research and development department as part of the sustainable engineering team. And broadly, what they do is they try and inform the BBC's sustainability strategy. So often through like modeling and forecasting. You can see here that one of the things we try and do is minimize the energy in user devices. So take some kind of responsibility for we're putting out content, people are watching it on their devices. We're trying to think about how we can minimize the energy that they're using when they do that. Why do we care about user devices? Well, preaching to the choir here probably, but the ICT sector is responsible for a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. User devices are responsible for the majority of those, if you kind of break it down by devices, networks, data centers, etc. And about half of those are in use stage. So that's the electricity you use to power those devices. There's a number of things we can think about when we think about reducing energy in user devices. But for someone that works at the BBC, the most obvious one is we're putting content on those devices. Whereas that content is on the display. So what can we do to the content that reduces the energy that the display is using? So displays take up a lot of the energy of a device. So for phones in particular, it's sort of anywhere between 40 and 70% of the energy the device is using is on the display. There's two main types. So you've got LCDs and OLEDs. And the main difference as far as sort of I'm concerned or energy is concerned is that LCDs use a backlight, which is always on. So it doesn't matter what content you have on there. It's always using essentially the same amount of power. It's only the brightness that matters. Whereas for OLEDs, each pixel lights up individually. So if you're displaying a darker screen, that is using less power than if you're displaying a light screen. Which is why people are interested in dark mode. Because it's also worth saying, people are interested in this for other reasons. The sustainability, it's for accessibility, and some people like the way it looks as well. This is some data from a Google study that just shows kind of what I was saying earlier. So you can see if you're displaying just a black screen, it uses a lot less power than if you're displaying a white screen. And the red, green, and blue are somewhere in the middle. It's worth pointing out that this is at max brightness. So the differences you get are less at lesser brightnesses. And the same developers looked at the light mode and dark mode for a bunch of different apps. You can see YouTube here, light mode and dark mode. And again, at high brightnesses, you're saving about 40% energy, which seems like a lot. But again, if you take it down to maybe 50% brightness, which is maybe more what you would generally be using your phone on or your laptop on, it's a much more modest 4%. And I've linked another study down the bottom that essentially finds very similar numbers. At max brightness, you're saving about 40% using dark mode, but for low brightnesses, you're saving a lot less. And studies like this, so if you Google dark mode and energy, you'll get a lot of headlines basically that tell you that if you turn your phone to dark mode, you'll save the planet. They will sometimes caveat that you'll only see that saving on an OLED device. But when I started to look into this, I'll admit I didn't know whether my device was OLED or not. I imagine that to be true of kind of the general population. So the advice generally is, well, it can't hurt, right? So you might as well switch to dark mode if you care about the planet. But what about the users? So something I noticed in a lot of this is people aren't thinking about the way that people that use, dark mode are using their device. So what are they doing differently when they use dark mode? So acting on kind of a hunch, I decided to run some user studies. So what I did was run an experiment. And my hypothesis basically was that if people are using dark mode, they might turn the brightness up more to compensate for the darker color scheme. So I did this just using some of the stuff we have to hand. So this is a power meter and a MacBook. The MacBook that I've done the tests on is an LCD screen. I didn't have access to an OLED for the power monitoring, so that's kind of future work that I hope to do in the new year. But if you look at the power on the MacBook, this is just showing kind of as we've already seen, as the brightness goes up, the power goes up, and for this, because it's an LCD, it doesn't matter what color content you're showing on there. So white screen, dark screen, it's the same. I then sort of ran these tests again in a more realistic way. So using a Selenium script, I ran an automated page visit for the dark mode of sounds, which is kind of what's on the left here, and then the light mode on the right. And power consumption kind of looks like this. So you can see roughly the same pattern where as brightness goes up, so does power. Again, because it's an LCD, the light mode and dark mode, there's no difference. I've slapped a line of best fit on this kind of last minute because I wanted to be able to offer a power estimate just in case anyone asked me at the end. But essentially, what you can see is that the light mode and the dark mode doesn't matter, only the brightness does for this LCD. So then what I did was had my participants sit in front of the device. I showed them the sounds website in light mode, and I showed them it in dark mode, and had them turn up the brightness until they were comfortable with that. That's how it looks, and that's how they would use it. And what you can see is that people are turning up. So this is for the MacBook, and I managed to source an OLED device just for the user studies, which I'm hoping to then run power tests on later. But you can see that for both devices, people are turning the brightness up higher for dark mode. And this is true whether you do this. So I did this in a light, sort of a well-lit environment, and it's true again if you do it in a more dimly lit environment. Yeah, people are turning the brightness up a bit higher. And if you use the line of best fit that I kind of slapped on earlier, the difference for dark and light mode is roughly sort of 0.5 watt to 1 watt, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you sort of multiply out by the billions of devices people are using and the hours and hours that they're using them for, it will add up to something significant. So that's kind of all I had to say about that. And I'll just end with, don't underestimate the power of the dark mode.
Thank you, Zach. Maybe one question. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. Really interesting. How many participants did you have in the study for the second piece of the study?
Sure. So the question was, how many participants did I have? I had 10 per device, so 10 different ones, which is a small sample, I'll admit. But I'm hoping to, in the new year as well as run more power, sort of run more participants as well. But yeah, so it's more of a pilot study, I guess.